Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Neil Woodrow and here are today's top stories. Britain pays tribute to Captain Tom Moore, a fundraising hero who inspired the nation. A new study suggests that one dose of the Oxford vaccine may reduce the spread of COVID-19. An ousted Burmese leader Aung San Suu Kyi is now facing charges after being detained. Britain paid tribute to Captain Tom Moore with flowers and lights. He is remembered for lifting the nation's spirits by raising millions of pounds for the health service workers. NTD's Lorraine Ferrier has more.
Captain Tom Moore raised tens of millions of pounds for the National Health Service by walking up and down his garden with the aid of his walking frame. He died aged 100 years old on Tuesday in Bedford Hospital after suffering from pneumonia and COVID-19. His picture was shown at London's Piccadilly Circus, while the London Eye, Wembley Stadium and the Blackpool Tower shone lights in his honour.
Now, on behalf of the whole England cricket team, we want to send our thoughts to him and his family. From the whole cricket community, he'll be sadly missed.
50 miles north of London, outside Captain Tom's home in Marston Mortain, children laid flowers.
I'm Sarah, we're gutted, really gutted. It's just such an inspiration in such a really sad time.
We just want to say rest in peace to Sir Captain Tom. He is a pillar of amazing support for this whole NHS, the whole community. He's brought the community a lot closer together.
Raised in Yorkshire, northern England, Captain Tom served in India, Burma and Sumatra during World War II. Lorraine Ferrier, NTD News.
A new study suggests that one dose of the oxford-astrazeneca vaccine may reduce the spread of COVID-19 by 2/3. But some independent researchers warn against the conclusion, saying the results may have been skewed. NTD's Earl Rhodes brings us the details.
UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock welcomes the study and said it shows the world the vaccine is effective and backs the UK strategy. The study says the vaccine reduces hospitalisations, infections, including asymptomatic infections, by around 2/3.
Because it shows that the strength of the protection you get is in fact slightly enhanced by a 12-week gap between the doses. So it's good news all round.
According to the Wall Street Journal, some independent researchers warn against the study's conclusions, saying factors such as age and dosing schedules were not controlled. The data also comes from the UK's testing system before the emergence of new variants. The UK recently detected some community cases of South African variant of the virus and want to mass test residents of 8 areas to stop the spread.
So we may well need boosters that have a slightly adjusted vaccine as well, in the same way that we do for flu each year.
The vaccine study was conducted by the University of Oxford, where the vaccine was developed. The EU approved the vaccine for all adults last week, though France restricts it to under 65s, citing insufficient data on its efficacy for older people. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
On Monday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said virtually all care home residents had received their first vaccine or been given an appointment for it. Julia Jones, co-founder of a care home campaign, says it's a huge milestone and visiting loved ones should recommence. Joanna Conway has the story.
As part of the UK's third national lockdown, all indoor close contact care home visits were banned in England. Jones says many elderly care home residents have not had meaningful communication with their relatives for almost a year.
What I think matters to us is that those people have died, very often being separated for, in some cases, almost a year from meaningful communication with their relatives.
The UK government has no plans for care home residents to have their second vaccine dose before the target time of 12 weeks. Jones says another 12-week wait is unacceptable for people dying of loneliness.
Attempt at separation to try and keep people safe is actually risking harm, and that's what we've been saying fairly consistently since March 2020.
She hopes the country can quickly get back to the pre-Christmas situation where extra testing and PPE were provided to care homes, enabling them to facilitate meaningful visits. Joanna Conway, NTD News.
Police in Burma, also known as Myanmar, charged ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi for illegally importing communication equipment. Police say 6 walkie-talkie radios were found at Suu Kyi's home and the radios were imported illegally and used without permission. The move follows a military coup on Monday, cutting short Burma's transition to democracy and drawing condemnation from the UK, the US and other Western countries. On Tuesday night, cars sounded their horns around Burma's biggest city, Yangon, in protest against the coup. Many residents banged their pots while saying all evil must go away to express their discontent. Russian police detained hundreds of protesters after Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny was sentenced to 3.5 years jail. His lawyers say they will appeal. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more.
According to the OVD Info Protest Monitoring Group, over 900 Navalny supporters were arrested trying to gather near the court before the ruling. Protesters were marching and chanting "Freedom! Putin is a thief! Let him go!"
I don't want my children to grow up in the same conditions I did. Alexei tries to do something at least.
Alexei Navalny has been wrongly convicted. The country will never be free if everyone behaves in this manner, the authorities, the courts and all.
Navalny, one of Putin's most prominent critics, was arrested after returning from Germany, where he was treated for poisoning from a military-grade nerve agent. The ruling is on alleged parole violations over a suspected sentence in an embezzlement case Navalny says was fabricated.
We are going to appeal and we are going to advise the Committee of Ministers of the European Council.
Navalny's lawyer said he will only serve 2 years and 8 months in jail because of the time he has already spent under house arrest. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
It's still not clear what happened to China's richest man, Jack Ma. NTD UK spoke with a German businessman who spent over 7 years in a Chinese prison. He has an idea. NTD's Christian Watchin has the story.
This week, a state-controlled Chinese newspaper celebrating China's tech entrepreneurs left out its most famous one. Jack Ma, founder of e-commerce giant Alibaba. Observers see it as a sign that Beijing is still at odds with China's richest man. Ma disappeared for 3 months after a speech criticizing China's regulators last year. Robert Rother has an idea of what happened to Ma. In 2011, as Rother was running a successful financial website in China, he was suddenly arrested and jailed.
After that, I spent the next 7 years, 7 months in pre-trial detention and in Chinese prison. And 18 months of that was just in detention without any indictment at all. The indictment came 18 months later. For that long, I had to hold out in more or less solitary confinement. And so from that, I know the game of what it's like to have lies put in front of you by the Chinese government.
Rother's conviction relied exclusively on testimonies from police interrogation. He says some of them were simply made up. Rother says in areas like finance or technology, the Chinese Communist Party works hard to maintain its control. Businessmen who become too independent and not willing to compromise or share certain information with the authorities face their ire.
When I was in prison, I met several businessmen who also had businesses that were very successful, and also just in niche areas where they might have developed a little monopoly position because of certain intelligence, and such people are wiped out. And then there are always allegations of corruption or contract fraud.
Last month, Ma appeared in a 50-second video message, with no mention of what happened to him. Rother believes Ma was on the regime's watch list for a while.
An arrest like that doesn't usually happen overnight. They plan it very well, and then they gather their evidence, in quotes, and at some point, when the time comes, then you get nicked, and then you're gone. And something like that happened with Jack Ma too.
Christian Watchin, NTD News, Berlin.
The House of Lords backed legislation that could stop the UK from striking trade deals with countries on human rights grounds. It comes amid growing concern over China's oppression of the Uighurs in Xinjiang. Here's NTD's Jane Werrell with the details.
to demonstrate that there is a genocide.
A moving debate in the House of Lords on disturbing topics, crimes against humanity and genocide.
This all-party amendment is a modest attempt to break the cycle of hatred and violence which will otherwise lead to more suffering by innocent human beings.
Brought forward by Lord Alton, his amendment to the trade bill gives UK courts the power to determine if a nation has committed genocide, and if it had, Parliament would be required to debate its next course of action. In moving speeches, several peers drew parallels between concentration camps in Nazi Germany and the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in China, emphasising action, not just nice words.
And remember that all it takes for evil to triumph, as Edmund Burke said, is for good people to be silent.
The amendment passed the House of Lords with a majority of 359 to 188. It will go to the Commons next week.
We do lead in this United Kingdom. We can be a force for good around the world, for prevention, and I hope that this House will allow the House of Commons to reflect on this properly.
Trade Minister Lord Grimston says trade doesn't need to come at the expense of human rights, but he added that there are issues with the legislation.
But we must proceed without amending the delicate balance in the Constitution and the role of the courts, no matter how terrible these issues are.
It's a view that's frustrating numerous lawmakers.
We have a government policy that only a court can decide on genocide. Then we have an amendment giving our High Court a power to decide on genocide, but the government says it's not effective.
An amendment that would have automatically revoked UK trade deals with countries found guilty of genocide didn't pass in the Commons last month, but it was very close. In the Commons next week, the government could be facing defeat. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
The Italian president asked a former European Central Bank chief, Mario Draghi, to head their government. Earlier, Draghi accepted the task. The move follows the collapse of Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's coalition.
I will, as soon as possible, give a mandate to form a new government that will be able to quickly face the very serious emergencies that I have mentioned before. That cannot be postponed. Thank you.
Draghi will preside over a €200 billion EU bailout package. He will oversee the CCP virus and the economic crisis affecting the country. There will also be an early election against a backdrop of the pandemic. If you're self-isolating, spare a thought for the Venetians some 600 years ago during the bubonic plague. NTD's Eddie Aiken has more about the city's quarantine islands.
The island of Lazaret in Venice is where the word quarantine originates. According to the president of the Archeo Club in Venice, the city was the first to adopt a system of isolation.
Venice made use of the islands and the characteristics of its own territory formed of bigger and smaller islands spread across the lagoon.
He says back then, the two islands, the old and the new Lazaret, were used for quarantine.
While the sick ones used to go to the old lazaret, the healthy ones were placed in the new lazaret.
The bubonic plague spread to Venice mostly through black mice from the sea and from the ships travelling from Africa or the East. Passengers and the crew were required to isolate for a period of about 40 days. Quarantena in Venetian translates to 40 days.
This is how the word quarantine came about. It was a period of roughly 40 days. It could vary. Graffiti testifies one quarantine of even 54 days.
Testimonies of the island's rich past were seen in the depot. People would leave their trace on the walls. This graffiti, left from the 15th and 16th centuries by people in quarantine on the island, reads, "On this day of the 8th of March 1587 arrived here at the new lazaret with 6 other companions. Today the depot is a museum where Venetian boats and artifacts from Lazaret Island and other parts of the lagoon are on display." Eddie Aiken, NTD News.
German startup Wingcopter joins the race to deliver vaccines by air. Its drones can fly up to 240 kilometers per hour and more than 100 kilometers on one battery charge. This enables delivery to remote areas, difficult to reach by foot or vehicle. Wingcopter manager Tom Plumer explains.
We want to use the drone during the coronavirus crisis to deliver vaccines more quickly and safely to their destination, while maintaining the cold chain. In summary, we can take off from one location and then send the drone to various final destinations.
Plumer says they have worked with UNICEF in the past to deliver vaccines to children in remote villages. They shortened the waiting period from hours to minutes, so they are experienced in knowing how to deliver COVID-19 vaccines efficiently. A Scottish inventor has created an artificial intelligence workout assistant. He says it can help those working out at home due to the pandemic. NTD's Trevor Piper has more on the story.
The technology, called the Suji device, uses a technique that harnesses blood flow restriction, or BFR. It tightens around the muscles, mimicking the conditions in high-intensity workouts, thereby tricking the body into a more effective workout while actually doing less exercise. Suji founder Alex Burks reveals his inspiration.
So I founded Suji BFR following a traumatic knee break that resulted in 2 surgeries and 13 months of rehabilitation.
While in rehab, he says he was frustrated with what was available and set about coming up with the Suji device. He says it can reduce joint pain and helps with muscle training.
With COVID, Suji doubles up as an effective at-home fitness solution, where people can achieve similar results to normal exercise, but with body weight or very low intensity stimulus.
It works by connecting to an app on your smart device. After calibrating your requirements, it assesses your fitness level and works out which exercises it recommends for you. Burke says it's good for all fitness levels. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
The pandemic may have stopped many things, but it didn't stop an international ballet competition in Switzerland. NTD's Lorraine Ferrier has the details.
Maya Rose Roberts, 16, from Britain, is among the contestants of Switzerland's Prix de Lausanne dance competition. She goes through the ballet positions on her own. Although performances are virtual, a former Paris Opera ballet star was amazed.
Seeing those dancers bringing joy, excellence, passion in those videos, it's absolutely amazing.
Dancers show pre-recorded routines on a flat screen in front of socially distanced judges in a hotel ballroom with no live audience. Catherine Bradeney, executive director of the competition, admitted it's a worrisome period since dance budgets are liable to be cut during the COVID-induced recession. But she was heartened by the dedication of the dancers.
Looking at the young dancers who have worked from home, the self-discipline it shows in their videos. We actually had auditions where they danced in their garage or in their living rooms, and they had a high level and they were so determined that I think that dance will prevail, actually.
Around 80 dancers aged 15 to 18 from 20 countries are vying for 6 prizes, which will be awarded on February 6. Lorraine Ferrier, NTD News.
That's all for tonight. See you tomorrow.